Hundreds of new laws go into effect this week in California, including several that protect the rights of the gay, lesbian, and transgender community. All of them were sponsored by Equality California, and they include California Gay Bullying Law, or Seth's Law, named after 13-year-old Seth Walsh. He was from Central California. He killed himself in 2010 after years of bullying. The law forces schools to address bullying through mandatory policies. The Gay Divorce Law, this allows a gay couple married in California but living in a state that won't grant them a divorce, the right to divorce in California. The LGBT Equality and Equal Access to Higher Education Law. This is an anti-harassment law that applies to state universities and colleges. The Transgender Non-Discrimination Law. This was authored by San Diego Assemblywoman Toni Atkins. It protects transgender Californians from discrimination with regard to employment, education, and housing. However, among the most controversial is the Fair, Accurate, Inclusive, and Respectful Education Act, sometimes called the Gay History Law. This law requires schools to teach factual lessons about the history of people with disabilities, people of color, and LGBT people in social studies class. State Senator Christine Kehoe, representing San Diego's 38th District, co-authored this bill. Well, joining me to talk about this new law is Colin Pierce, co-chair of San Diego's chapter of the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, and William Eady, professor of journalism and media studies at San Diego State University. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Colin, I want to begin with you. Tell me what this law aims to do in the classroom.
Quite simply, this law aims to create a safer environment and a safe and supportive classroom environment for all students. It's, in a sense, it's a new law. In a sense, it's not. There's already legislation in California. There's already an acceptance that we want our lessons, our curriculum to reflect the diversity of the children that are sitting in the classrooms. And what this legislation does is it adds a couple of groups that were omitted the first time round. So people with disabilities, Pacific Islanders, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people.
Now, I mentioned one of the new laws does attempt to address bullying. How would this law also contribute to that end, to try and sort of combat bullying in schools?
I think that one of the things that we're looking to do is a couple of things. The law is aimed to make the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender students who are in a classroom feel that they're accepted, that they're reflected in the lessons. I think that what it also does is it promotes an acceptance and a tolerance amongst their peers, amongst their classmates, so that that's certainly going to create a safer environment for them. And also I would add that it's not always just gay students that are at risk. You mentioned Seth Walsh, who tragically took his life. There have been numerous other incidents over past months of those type of incidents, and in several of those cases, it wasn't clear that the student who took their life was actually a gay student. In many cases, that's what was perceived, or that was the slur that their classmates felt was going to be the most painful, the most hurtful to throw around. So I think that by introducing this kind of law, by talking a little bit more about the contributions of LGBT people through the history of this country and California, that's going to educate their classmates, reduce that stigma, and create a much safer environment for all students.
Now, Bill, we know there are a number of groups who want this law repealed. Tell us a little bit about those groups.
Well, this goes back to the Proposition 8 campaign of a couple of years ago when marriage equality was proposed in California. The groups that opposed marriage equality and put Proposition 8 on the ballot were primarily conservative, primarily religious in their orientation, and they saw marriage equality as a threat to the traditional family. What they found was that one of the best arguments that worked in persuading people to adopt Proposition 8 was that it would threaten somehow the children, that children would be unsafe in school, that they might become sexual objects, and also that they would learn about sexual practices of which their parents disapproved.
I want to mention a couple of those groups and read a couple of statements. There is a group called Stop SB48, and what they're attempting to do is get enough signatures on the ballot they can repeal it. And their statement says, our public schools are not institutions for social engineering. SB48 does absolutely nothing to reduce bullying, improve the state of our education system, ensure students graduate, or prepare them for global competitiveness. Instead, it diverts precious classroom time and resources away from science, math, reading, and writing to promote the political agenda of a few. I want to read one more, and this one comes from the group Save California. The clock is ticking for dads and moms to rescue their children from unnatural and unhealthy homosexual, bisexual, cross-dressing role models coming January to every California public school. And that's from Randy Thomason, president of Save California. Now, Bill, we do know that when this passed, it basically passed along party lines. There was only one Republican who supported this law. It was actually Nathan Fletcher, also mayoral candidate. He's a Republican. He supported it. If there isn't support among the Republicans for this, do they have a shot at actually getting this on the initiative and repealing this?
Well, they've already tried once and didn't manage to gather enough signatures. It's interesting that the group that is probably has the best chance of gathering signatures because they're the best financed is a group that that would just simply wipe out gays and lesbians from the law. They would leave everybody else in the law and say it's fine to teach our students about diversity, but don't include gays and lesbians. Now, I'm not sure that that's a particularly good approach to teaching diversity in California.
So, Colin, let's talk about how we might see this in the classroom. Are we talking about things sort of in the civil rights movement, particular events that kids will now be taught, or is it more people already in history that will now learn their sexual identity?
It'll be both of those, and some important things to stress, and some of the fear-mongering I think about this legislation overlooks is that the legislation is very clear that lesson plans must be age-appropriate, they must be factual, and there's also direction that schools and school districts work with parents to develop lesson plans that they feel comfortable with. So, so certainly parents would be involved in these. There's some of the examples that, or a particular example that I would give is, I'm sure that there are many students who've learned about the civil rights movement, who learned and read about the March on Washington, may well not know that the architect, the primary organizer of that march, Bayard Rustin, was an openly gay man and had temporarily been ostracized from the civil rights movement for a number of years before he was invited back to organize that march. Now, Representative John Lewis referenced his contribution and said that the March on Washington without Bayard Rustin would have been like a bird without wings. Now, that to me sounds like a pretty significant contribution, but I would imagine that in most of the history books and in most of the lessons, he's not included. And so what's important is that if you're a gay boy, a lesbian girl, sitting in a classroom, and you learn about the kind of contribution of somebody like that into our history, it makes you feel that much better about yourself. Your self-worth is improved. And I think it also opens the eyes of some of your classmates to the contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people within this country.
We have so little time left, but I want to throw this out there because people at home are going to be wondering this. In terms of age appropriateness, when you have kids who are 6 or 7 or 8 years old, how you achieve that balance of being age appropriate yet still identifying sexual identity. Who wants to tackle that in about 30 seconds? Colin?
That's a great idea.
I mean, I think definitely it will vary according to age, but one example is that it's common practice for kindergartners to come in and be asked to bring in a photograph of their family and to talk to their classmates about their families. Well, you may have a girl who has 2 moms. Well, she's going to bring in a photograph that represents her family, and it's important that her ability to share her family experience and to talk about her family be exactly the same as those of any other children in that class. Because I think it's ironic that when we talked about the opposition to Prop 8 and their focus on the well-being of children, this is a clear example where we're asking people to be concerned about the well-being and the safety of all children, and to not exclude a group that is significantly sort of under threat in our schools right now.
We're going to have to leave it there. Colin Pierce and Bill Eadie, thank you both so much for being here.